Shadows over Hemp Hill. In the heart of Texas lies Hemp Hill, a tiny town where life appears serene and unchanging. The streets are lined with weathered storefronts, family-run diners, and houses where neighbors share warm greetings. Despite its idyllic facade, Hemp Hill conceals undercurrents of tension and unresolved conflicts that simmer quietly beneath the surface. The night of Halloween 2020 arrived with an unusual heaviness in the air. The moon cast a silvery glow over ancient oaks, and the normally festive atmosphere was tinged with an unsettling stillness. It was as if the town collectively sensed that something was amiss, that the familiar comfort of Hemp Hill was about to be disrupted by impending tragedy. At the center of this quiet storm was Livy Lewis, a 19-year-old young woman known throughout Hemp Hill for her kindness, compassion, and dedication to caring for others. Livy's gentle smile and warm demeanor made her beloved by all who knew her. As a certified nursing assistant working at a local nursing home, she embodied empathy, always ready to lend a hand, offer comfort, or bring joy to those around her. The community saw in Livy a beacon of hope. She was on the cusp of beginning a bright future, with plans to attend college to further her nursing career and eventually become a physician's assistant. Livy's life was defined by her selflessness and her unwavering commitment to helping others, qualities that made her presence in Hemp Hill feel like a comforting embrace in a world that could sometimes feel cold and impersonal. As autumn deepened, so did the contrasts within the town. While the streets were adorned with vibrant fall colors, and the sounds of community gatherings filled the air, subtle signs of discord began to emerge. Beneath the surface of neighborly smiles and friendly waves lay unspoken tensions, small fractures in relationships, concealed resentments, and the quiet burden of personal struggles. On that fateful Halloween Eve, Livy moved through the town embodying hope and warmth, unaware of the dark tide approaching. The festive air, filled with laughter and the scent of bonfires, masked the brewing storm of unresolved anger and hidden secrets that would soon converge upon her life. Hemp Hill's close-knit nature meant that everyone knew each other, and Livy's kindness resonated deeply with the townspeople. Her genuine concern for others created a sense of safety and trust, making the impending tragedy all the more jarring. While Livy navigated the familiar streets, she radiated an innocence that stood in stark contrast to the undercurrents of tension lurking in the shadows. As midnight approached, the quiet night took on an eerie stillness. The juxtaposition of Livy's gentle spirit with the unseen forces of strife and darkness created a poignant sense of foreboding. The town's tranquility was fragile, poised on the brink of a transformative event that would shatter its peace. A web of complexity and tension. The days following that ominous Halloween night saw Hemp Hill slowly return to its quiet routine, but beneath the surface, a tangled web of relationships and emotions began to emerge. A web that would gradually reveal the dark undercurrents of Livy Lewis's world. In this part, we delve into the intricate layers of Livy's relationship with Matthew Edgar, the pervasive atmosphere of domestic violence, the insidious influence of overindulgence by loved ones, and the corrosive effects of substance abuse that stain the fabric of their lives. The fragile bond between Livy and Matthew. Livy and Matthew's connection was born out of a shared history in Hemp Hill, growing from friendly acquaintances into a secret relationship that defied the neat boundaries of their small community. Livy, with her unwavering kindness and gentle spirit, seemed like a guiding light for Matthew, a troubled soul yearning for understanding, love, and stability. Yet, as their relationship deepened, cracks began to surface in this fragile bond. Matthew Edgar was a man carrying the weight of contradictions. To the outside world, he appeared to be a charismatic figure, charming in social settings, helpful when needed, and seemingly devoted to his family. However, behind closed doors, the veneer of normalcy concealed a turbulent storm of jealousy, rage, and desperation. His emotions swung wildly from tenderness to explosiveness, creating a precarious environment for Livy, who found herself caught in a maelstrom of affection and fear. Their relationship was a delicate dance of intimacy and distance. At times, Matthew would shower Livy with affection, bringing her small tokens of love, whispering promises of a future together, and seemingly sharing in her dreams for a better life. These moments of tenderness made Livy believe in the possibility of change, of redemption. Yet they were invariably followed by unsettling displays of anger, physical aggression, and verbal abuse that left her wounded both physically and emotionally. Domestic violence and its lingering scars. The undercurrent of violence in their relationship was not an isolated phenomenon. It was part of a broader pattern that Matthew had exhibited in other aspects of his life, particularly within his family. Livy witnessed firsthand the shadows of this behavior. Simple disagreements would escalate rapidly into loud confrontations, where Matthew's fist might strike out in anger or his voice would lower to a guttural threat. In these turbulent moments, Livy experienced a complex mix of fear and sorrow. Fear for her safety and sorrow for the man she once believed she could save. The physical scars on her body were visible reminders of these episodes, but the deeper wounds were etched into her psyche. The anxiety that gripped her at the sound of raised voices, the dread of confrontation, the creeping sense of isolation as she found herself trapped in a cycle she couldn't break. Within the context of their relationship, domestic violence wasn't just about physical harm. It was a corrosive force that slowly eroded trust and love. Each incident was a betrayal, chipping away at Livy's sense of self-worth. The emotional toll was heavy, as she oscillated between hope that things might get better and despair that she was doomed to repeat the same cycle. The influence of overindulgence and family dynamics. Matthew's mother, Cindy Edgar, played a particularly pivotal role. A woman with her own complexities, Cindy was fiercely protective of her son, often to a fault. Her tendency to overindulge Matthew, to shield him from consequences, and to dismiss or downplay his troubling behavior created an environment where his actions were rarely questioned. This overindulgence had roots in a deep, perhaps misguided, love. Cindy wanted to see her son succeed and be happy, and she may have reasoned that by avoiding confrontations or covering for his mistakes, she was helping him. However, this protective bubble around Matthew prevented him from facing the reality of his behavior. It allowed him to carry on without learning accountability, reinforcing a sense of entitlement and impunity. For Livy, this dynamic was confusing and painful. As she experienced mistreatment at the hands of Matthew, her attempts to seek understanding or support were met with responses that often blamed her or minimized her suffering. The family's inability to confront the truth about Matthew's violent tendencies left Livy feeling isolated. The warmth that she once found in family circles was tainted by denial and secrets, and she found herself caught in a web of loyalty and betrayal that made it difficult to escape. The underlying role of substance abuse. Matthew's descent into violence was closely intertwined with his abuse of substances, primarily alcohol, and possibly other drugs. In many parts of America, substance abuse serves as both a symptom and a catalyst for domestic turmoil. For Matthew, the bottle became both a refuge from his inner demons and a trigger for his most destructive behaviors. On nights when he drank heavily, his inhibitions dropped, and the latent anger and jealousy that simmered beneath his surface would explode. Alcohol impaired his judgment, distorting his perceptions of Livy's actions and intentions, and magnifying every insecurity and fear. The tactile presence of a bottle, the smell of whiskey on his breath, the slurred urgency in his voice, all these details painted a picture of a man spiraling out of control, his humanity lost amid the haze of intoxication. Substance abuse wasn't just a personal failing for Matthew. It had a ripple effect on those around him. Livy, caught in this turbulent dynamic, often found herself navigating not just the unpredictable moods of a violent partner, but also the toxic environment created by constant drinking. The persistent presence of alcohol in the home eroded any sense of safety or predictability, leaving Livy and others in a state of hypervigilance, waiting for the next outburst, the next confrontation. The weight of unspoken secrets and hidden conflicts. In the seemingly peaceful exterior of Hemp Hill, unspoken secrets and hidden conflicts loomed large. The town's close-knit nature meant that gossip traveled quickly, but certain truths remained locked behind polite smiles and considerate gestures. Livy's struggles and the toxic dynamics with Matthew were not openly discussed. They were hushed, tucked away in private moments, never fully seen by outsiders. This concealment exacerbated Livy's isolation. Without a support network aware of the true nature of her circumstances, she found herself shouldering the burden of fear and uncertainty alone. The silence around domestic violence in Hemp Hill was deafening. Neighbors might sense that something was wrong, but the cultural tendency to respect privacy and avoid meddling kept them from intervening. This collective silence allowed the cycle of abuse to continue unchecked, creating an environment where Livy's cries for help were muted by communal avoidance. A glimpse into Livy's inner world. Despite the turmoil around her, Livy remained a beacon of resilience. In quiet moments, away from the harsh realities of her relationship with Matthew, she clung to memories of better days, childhood summers filled with laughter, the encouragement of teachers and friends who believed in her potential, and dreams of a future where she could make a difference in the world. These moments of reflection provided a temporary respite from the darkness that surrounded her, fueling a quiet determination to survive. Her interactions at the nursing home, where she cared for the elderly with tenderness and dedication, offered her a glimpse of a life defined by purpose and hope. In the gentle hands of those she cared for, Livy found strength. Their smiles and gratitude reminded her that her life had value beyond the confines of her troubled relationship. These brief interludes of light amid the darkness were what sustained her, even as the storm of violence and substance abuse threatened to engulf her world. The community's unseen struggles. While Livy's story was unfolding behind closed doors, Hemp Hill as a community grappled with its own struggles. Beneath the veneer of neighborliness, there were families dealing with unspoken grief, individuals battling addiction, and parents overindulging their children out of fear or misguided love. The town's reluctance to confront these issues openly created a pressure cooker environment where problems festered and grew. The community's inability or unwillingness to acknowledge domestic violence, substance abuse, and the need for mental health support meant that people like Matthew found themselves without the intervention that might have steered them away from destructive paths. Overindulgence by family members, motivated by love but misplaced, turned a blind eye to warning signs, effectively enabling harmful behavior. This cultural context provided fertile ground for a tragedy like Livy's to occur, as systemic issues went unaddressed. The tension building towards the inevitable. As days turned into weeks, and the specter of Livy's fate began to loom larger in the background, the tension between hope and despair in her life intensified. Each encounter with Matthew became fraught with uncertainty. Would he embrace a moment of tenderness, or would his anger erupt anew? Each warning sign, each bruise hidden beneath sleeves and scarves, was a silent plea for help that went unheeded. The fateful Halloween night, climax of tragedy. The night of Halloween 2020 in Hemp Hill unfolded like a dark symphony, a blend of eerie quiet and subtle chaos, all building toward an inevitable crescendo. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, as if the very air carried the weight of unspoken fears. This part delves into the chilling events of that night, the moments leading up to the ultimate tragedy and the unraveling of a life that once shone so brightly. The eve of darkness. As dusk melted into nightfall, Hemp Hill was enveloped in a soft glow from jack-o'-lanterns lining porches and the distant murmur of Halloween festivities. Children in costumes darted between houses, their laughter echoing in the cool air. Yet beneath the cheerful veneer, a tension simmered, a quiet dread that something was amiss. Livy Lewis had spent the earlier part of the evening surrounded by friends and community, her laughter blending seamlessly with the jovial tone of the neighborhood. Her presence was like a calming influence, her sincerity cutting through the frivolity that often accompanies such nights. But as the evening wore on, the shadows stretched longer, and the bright autumn colors gave way to deeper, more somber tones. A collision of paths. Unbeknownst to Livy, several events were coalescing that would soon change the course of her life. Matthew Edgar, isolated in his tumultuous thoughts and drowning in alcohol, had been grappling with the news of Livy's recent decisions, her desire for independence, her resolve to leave the spiral of toxicity that bound her to him. His jealousy and fear of abandonment festered beneath each swig of whiskey, warping his perception, until rational thought became a distant memory. On that fateful night, Matthew had attended a gathering at Bobby Ozan's house, a place where the community came together in celebration, but for Matthew, it became a vortex of frustration and anger. His intentions were muddled by alcohol, and as the party dwindled, his mind fixated on Livy. Rumors had been circulating that Livy might spend the night elsewhere, a thought that ignited a spark of rage in his heart. As the night deepened, Livy decided to leave the party, seeking a moment of solitude or perhaps a quiet drive home under the starlit sky. Unaware of the dark storm approaching her, she stepped out into the cool night, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot echoing in the silence. The tension mounts. In the hours after midnight, the town lay in a deceptive calm. Streetlights cast long shadows across empty roads, and the usual sounds of neighborhood life were replaced by the distant whisper of wind through the trees. It was during these quiet moments that the fragile barriers between civility and chaos seemed to waver. Matthew, now alone and intoxicated, drove through the deserted streets in his truck, his mind a chaotic mixture of anger, despair, and blurred memories. The cool night air did little to clear the haze that clouded his judgment. He was driven by a singular, disturbing purpose: to confront Livy, to change the course of events that had set him on this dark path. As fate would have it, their paths converged on a lonely stretch of road, one that would soon bear witness to a tragedy echoing through the years. Livy was in her car, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard lights, when she noticed something unusual on the roadside. Perhaps it was the flash of headlights in the distance, or the sound of another vehicle pulling over. In that moment, a tension crackled in the air, signaling an encounter that neither could have foreseen fully. The tragic confrontation. The encounter between Livy and Matthew was fraught with a chilling sense of inevitability. Under the dim light, their vehicles met on a quiet stretch of road. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Livy, vulnerable and unaware of the full extent of Matthew's turmoil, and Matthew, fueled by alcohol and an overpowering mix of jealousy and rage. There are conflicting accounts of the exact dialogue that transpired, but what is clear is that a confrontation unfolded. Matthew, consumed by his inner demons, approached Livy's car with agitation. In those terrifying minutes, the muted hum of the night was shattered by shouts, the screeching of tires, and the heavy breathing of two souls entangled in a tragic moment. Livy, confronted with the raw anger of a man she once cared for, likely experienced a kaleidoscope of emotions: confusion, fear, disbelief. The warmth of her gentle spirit clashed violently with the dark storm of Matthew's rage. Witnesses later described the scene as chaotic, a blur of movement, desperate pleas, and the sudden, shocking sound of a gunshot. In the immediate aftermath, the world seemed to fall silent once more. Livy's life, so full of promise, was abruptly snuffed out like a candle in a cold wind. Her body was found draped over the steering wheel of her car, the chilling evidence of the rifle shot marking the tragic end of her journey. The scene of tragedy. When first responders arrived, the scene was both surreal and heart-wrenching. Under the ghostly glow of emergency lights, paramedics moved with solemn purpose, trying to revive a life that had been so cruelly taken. But the reality was stark. Livy Lewis was gone. The serenity of the night was shattered by the harsh cries of those who discovered her, a mother, a friend, a community mourning the loss of a shining star extinguished too soon. The discovery of Livy's body set off a chain reaction of grief and shock throughout Hemp Hill. Her family, friends, and the townspeople were plunged into a nightmare from which there seemed no immediate escape. The shocking tableau of a young life ended in such a brutal way reverberated through everyone's hearts, leaving behind scars that would take years to heal. Unraveling the aftermath. In the hours following the tragedy, Hemp Hill transformed from a peaceful town into a community grappling with collective grief and disbelief. Neighbors gathered, sharing memories of Livy, the way she would light up a room, her unyielding kindness, her dedication to those in need. Each story was a stitch in the tapestry of her legacy, a reminder of the profound impact one life can have. As investigators arrived on the scene, the quiet streets became a flurry of activity. Crime scene tape was unfurled, flashlights swept through the darkness, and questions began to form in the minds of everyone who loved Livy. What had happened? How could this have been prevented? Who was responsible for taking away such a promising life? Though details were sketchy in those early hours, a pattern began to emerge, one that pointed toward a confrontation fueled by anger, jealousy, and substance abuse. The significance of that fateful moment on the dark road would soon unravel, revealing layers of complexity and tragedy that extended far beyond a single act of violence. The community's collective grief. The impact of Livy's death rippled through Hemp Hill like a shockwave. Mourners lined the streets, leaving flowers, candles, and heartfelt messages at the scene where her life had ended. The warmth of a community that once felt so secure was replaced by an eerie silence, a void where laughter and life once thrived. In the days and weeks that followed, Hemp Hill would be forever changed. Conversations turned from simple pleasantries to hushed discussions of fear and loss. The tragedy of Livy Lewis became a somber lesson etched into the collective memory of the town, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk behind even the most familiar faces. The last moments of Livy. While the exact details of Livy's final moments remain shrouded in painful uncertainty, the legacy she left behind is clear. In her short life, she touched countless souls with her compassion, kindness, and unwavering dedication to helping others. The tragedy that befell her underscores the complexity of human relationships and the tragic potential when love turns into possessiveness and vulnerability is met with violence. As the investigation into her death would continue to unfold in the ensuing days and months, the image of Livy, bright, caring, and tragically taken, remained imprinted on the hearts of those in Hemp Hill. Her story, woven with hope and sorrow, would serve as a catalyst for change, compelling the community to confront the dark realities of domestic violence, substance abuse, and the silent struggles that often go unnoticed until it's too late. The aftermath and unraveling of truths. In the wake of Livy Lewis's tragic death, Hemp Hill found itself thrust into a maelstrom of grief, suspicion, and relentless inquiry. The quiet town, once a tapestry of ordinary life, was now a stage for a complex investigation that would peel back layers of secrecy, resentment, and unanswered questions. This part explores the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, the mounting suspicion surrounding those closest to Livy, the painstaking investigative process, and the emotional toll on the community grappling with the loss and the search for answers. The shattered community. Neighbors who once exchanged friendly greetings now spoke in hushed tones, their voices trembling with disbelief and sorrow. Memorials sprang up overnight, bouquets of wildflowers left on sidewalks, candles flickering in windows, and handwritten notes bearing messages of condolence and memories of Livy's warmth. The sense of safety that had once pervaded the town had been irrevocably broken, replaced by a pervasive feeling of vulnerability. As days turned into weeks, the collective grief gradually morphed into a determined quest for truth. Families of the community, still raw with loss, found themselves wrestling with a gnawing need to understand how such a senseless act could happen under the watchful eyes of a close-knit community. The investigation into Livy's death became not only a pursuit of justice, but also a means for Hemp Hill to begin healing its wounds. The investigation unfolds. Law enforcement descended upon the quiet streets of Hemp Hill with a solemn duty to uncover what had transpired. Detectives meticulously combed through the crime scene, collecting fragments of evidence, a discarded shell casing glinting in the dawn light, tire tracks in the damp earth, and the silent testimony of Livy's untouched belongings left in her car. Every detail was scrutinized, every witness statement carefully recorded, as investigators attempted to reconstruct the harrowing events of that night. At the heart of the investigation lay Matthew Edgar, a figure now shrouded in suspicion. His connection to Livy, their turbulent relationship, and his presence near the scene could not be ignored. Detectives conducted long, arduous interviews with friends, family, and acquaintances of both Livy and Matthew. Each conversation revealed more about the intricate dynamics of their relationship, the tender moments that had once promised a future together, now overshadowed by memories of anger and fear. The role of family and community dynamics. As investigators delved deeper, they began to untangle the family dynamics that played a crucial role in shaping the events leading up to Livy's death. Matthew's mother, Cindy Edgar, emerged as a complex figure. Her overprotectiveness and habitual indulgence of Matthew's behavior had inadvertently fostered an environment where red flags were often overlooked. Cindy's reluctance to fully acknowledge or confront Matthew's darker tendencies became a focal point of scrutiny. Was she shielding him out of maternal love, or was there a deeper, more concerning motive at play? The overindulgence extended beyond Cindy. Other family members and community figures, motivated by loyalty or fear of conflict, often chose silence over intervention. This culture of avoidance allowed troubling patterns, domestic disputes fueled by jealousy and substance abuse, to persist behind closed doors. Livy, despite her gentle nature, found herself entangled in this web, her pleas for help muffled by a culture that preferred to maintain appearances rather than confront painful truths. Substance abuse, a catalyst for chaos. Interwoven with the human drama was the insidious influence of substance abuse. Matthew Edgar's heavy drinking had long been a catalyst for erratic and violent behavior. Witnesses recounted nights when Matthew's anger was heightened by the haze of alcohol, his actions unpredictable, and his words laced with venom. Such behavior was not isolated to one night, but was a recurring theme that had estranged him from those who once cared for him and further isolated Livy. The presence of alcohol on that fateful night, Matthew's breath heavy with whiskey, the empty bottles scattered in the wake of his erratic journey, became symbolic of his loss of control. Substance abuse had blurred the lines between rational thought and furious impulse, setting the stage for the catastrophic decisions that unfolded. For Livy, each confrontation with a drunken Matthew was a brush with danger, each moment a fragile calm before a storm of anger and violence. The emotional toll on those left behind. The investigation, while necessary, opened old wounds for Livy's family and friends. Darcy Bass, Livy's mother, found herself oscillating between fierce determination to seek justice for her daughter and the crushing weight of grief. Her interactions with law enforcement were charged with raw emotion, a blend of urgent questions, pleading for accountability, and a desire for closure that seemed just out of reach. Friends of Livy, like Taylor Barnett, recounted memories with tears in their eyes, their voices trembling as they described her compassion, her laughter, and the subtle signs of fear she had exhibited in moments of conflict. Each testimony painted a vivid portrait of a young woman who had faced darkness with remarkable strength, making her loss all the more poignant. For the community, the investigation became a collective catharsis, a shared journey through sorrow, as they sought to understand the forces that led to such a tragedy. Neighborhoods once filled with laughter and camaraderie now shared a bond forged in grief and a common desire to prevent such heartache from recurring. There was a renewed call for transparency, for addressing the undercurrents of abuse and addiction that had long been swept under the rug, unveiling hidden conflicts and suspicions. As clues accumulated, suspicion began to shift and expand. While Matthew Edgar remained the primary focus, investigators also considered the possibility of complicity or involvement from others who might have been close to Livy. The complexity of her relationships, friendships strained by jealousy, family ties weakened by secrets, opened up avenues of inquiry into who else might have known of her struggles, who else might have had a hand in the events of that night. Detectives revisited testimonies, cross-referenced phone records, and analyzed patterns of behavior. Each piece of evidence was a thread in a larger tapestry of hidden conflicts and unspoken fears. The absence of certain forensic evidence, fingerprints on the weapon, DNA traces that didn't match either Livy or Matthew, raised questions about what truly transpired. Was there someone else present, lurking in the shadows, who played a role in the unthinkable event? The investigation cast a wider net, attempting to piece together a puzzle where some pieces were still missing. The crumbling facade of innocence. Hemp Hill's image as a peaceful, insular town began to crack as layers of secrecy were peeled away. Residents who once exuded confidence in their close-knit community started to confront uncomfortable truths about their neighbors and themselves. The facade of innocence gave way to the realization that violence, substance abuse, and unspoken conflicts were not foreign to their lives. They were threads woven into the very fabric of Hemp Hill. The unraveling of these hidden realities forced the community to face the stark contrast between the welcoming exterior they cherished and the turbulent undercurrents that had led to Livy's demise. This confrontation with reality was painful, yet it was a necessary step toward healing, a collective reckoning that might prevent future tragedies if it spurred meaningful change. The weight of unanswered questions. Even as the investigation pressed on, questions remained, many of them without immediate answers. How could a community as close-knit as Hemp Hill harbor such dark secrets? What mechanisms could have been implemented to detect and prevent the early signs of domestic abuse and substance abuse spiraling out of control? And perhaps most hauntingly, how could someone as kind and caring as Livy Lewis find herself trapped in a situation where tragedy was unavoidable? These unanswered questions loomed over everyone, fueling a desire for closure that seemed increasingly elusive. They also underscored the complexity of human nature and the myriad factors that can lead to catastrophic outcomes, a delicate interplay of personal failings, systemic neglect, and cultural taboos that allowed suffering to continue unchecked. Seeking redemption and the path forward. In the months and years following the tragedy of Livy Lewis, Hemp Hill stood at a crossroads. The ripples of grief, anger, and unresolved questions gradually gave way to a cautious but determined movement toward healing and change. Part 5 charts the community's pursuit of redemption, the long road to justice, and the reflective journey of individuals and the town as a whole as they attempt to transform dark memories into catalysts for a brighter future. The trial and its aftermath. As the investigation reached its conclusion, the case against Matthew Edgar gathered momentum. The town, once shrouded in uncertainty and suspicion, now found a semblance of clarity as the legal process unfolded. The courtroom became a crucible where emotions, evidence, and the collective voice of Hemp Hill converged. For Livy's family, particularly her mother, Darcy Bass, the trial was both a vindication and a painful re-examination of their world. Darcy confronted a legal system that seemed distant from her raw grief, yet she steeled herself to listen to every detail brought forth in pursuit of truth. The prosecution laid out a tapestry of evidence, graphic details of their turbulent relationship, eyewitness accounts of violent incidents, and forensic clues that painted a grim picture of that Halloween night. Matthew Edgar's defense struggled to counter the weight of testimonial and physical evidence, but rumors and shadows still lingered. The community anxiously watched the proceedings, a mix of relief and apprehension coursing through them. Every testimony, every piece of evidence felt like a step closer to understanding not only how Livy died, but why a place like Hemp Hill, so warm and intimate, could harbor such darkness. Ultimately, the jury found Matthew Edgar guilty of Livy's murder. His conviction was a solemn moment for Hemp Hill, a bittersweet closure that justice had been served but at a cost that could never truly be mended. The sentence, a lengthy prison term without the prospect of parole for decades, ensured that while the wound remained, the perpetrator would be held accountable, providing a measure of solace to those left behind. Community healing and transformation. With the conclusion of the trial came a gradual shift in Hemp Hill. The shadow that had loomed over the town for so long began to recede, as the community collectively sought paths to healing. Memorials for Livy became spaces not only of mourning, but also of reflection and commitment to change. The site where she was taken so tragically was transformed into a quiet memorial, adorned with flowers, candles, and messages of remembrance that spoke to her kindness, resilience, and the potential that was so cruelly extinguished. Community leaders, spurred by the loss and the subsequent introspection, began initiatives aimed at preventing similar tragedies. Local organizations started hosting workshops on domestic violence awareness, substance abuse prevention, and healthy relationship education. These efforts were driven by a shared determination to break the cycles of silence and enable open conversations that could save lives. For many in Hemp Hill, the tragedy of Livy Lewis became a catalyst for confronting uncomfortable truths. Town meetings, once rare in such a tight-knit community, now served as forums for discussing issues that had been swept under the rug for generations. Personal journeys of redemption. As the legal and communal processes unfolded, individual members of Hemp Hill embarked on deeply personal journeys of redemption and reflection. Darcy Bass, with her fierce love for her daughter and her unwavering pursuit of justice, became an outspoken advocate for domestic violence victims. Her painful experience evolved into a mission to ensure that others did not suffer the same fate as Livy, and that the community would be more vigilant, empathetic, and proactive in addressing warning signs of abuse. Friends of Livy, such as Taylor Barnett, channeled their grief into advocacy and support for those in similar situations. They organized support groups, created awareness campaigns, and lent their voices to campaigns against substance abuse. Their shared memories of Livy served as a beacon of what could be achieved if the community united in empathy, and resolve rather than silence and fear. For those who had once turned a blind eye, neighbors who knew of the unspoken tensions but lacked the tools or courage to intervene, there was now a collective reckoning. Many sought counseling, education, and community support to understand and change behaviors that, while once overlooked, might have contributed to the tragedy. This introspection was painful but necessary, as it marked a willingness to confront one's complicity in a culture of silence and overindulgence that had allowed darkness to fester. Systemic changes and community support. In the broader context, the tragedy prompted systemic changes at the local level. Schools in Hemp Hill incorporated comprehensive programs on conflict resolution, healthy relationships, and substance abuse prevention into their curriculum. Law enforcement agencies strengthened partnerships with community organizations to ensure early intervention in cases of domestic violence and to offer support to victims and families in crisis. Local government officials, recognizing the need for mental health resources, worked to secure funding for counseling services, addiction treatment centers, and community outreach programs. These initiatives aimed not only to respond to crises, but to foster an environment where issues could be openly discussed and addressed before they escalated into tragedies. The community also rallied to support families in need, setting up food banks, organizing neighborhood watch groups, and creating safe spaces where individuals could share their struggles without fear of judgment. The transformation was gradual, a tapestry of small but significant acts of compassion and courage that collectively began to reshape Hemp Hill's social fabric. Reflection and lessons learned. As time moved forward, the memory of Livy Lewis became more than just a symbol of loss. It became a turning point for Hemp Hill. The community began to celebrate her life, not solely in the context of her tragic death, but as an enduring reminder of the values she embodied: kindness, empathy, and selflessness. In quiet moments, residents would reflect on what they had learned. They questioned how they could spot the silent cries for help in their neighbors, how they could break the cycle of overindulgence that enabled dangerous behaviors, and how they could foster an environment where issues like domestic violence and substance abuse were met with support rather than denial. The lessons gleaned from Livy's story reverberated beyond Hemp Hill's borders, inspiring neighboring towns and communities to examine their own cultures and practices. Advocacy groups used her story as a poignant case study, highlighting the interconnectedness of individual actions, family dynamics, community silence, and systemic failure. They stressed the importance of vigilance, intervention, and education in preventing similar tragedies. A legacy of hope amidst loss. Despite the profound grief and the scars left behind, Hemp Hill began to embrace a legacy of hope. Livy's life, though tragically cut short, had sown seeds that would blossom into a more aware, compassionate, and proactive community. Her memory fueled conversations that once might have been too difficult to have, and her story became a rallying cry for change. While the wounds inflicted by Livy's death would never fully fade, they served as a grim reminder of the consequences of unchecked violence, substance abuse, and overindulgence. The community's resolve to address these issues head-on was a testament to the enduring power of collective action and the human spirit's capacity to find light even in the darkest of times.